I never imagined our 15-year marriage would end over roasted duck and vintage wine. The crystal chandelier in our dining room cast a warm glow over the mahogany table where our family gathered for what was supposed to be a celebratory dinner announcing Maxwell's latest business acquisition. Instead, it became the night my world shattered. "I need someone who can give me heirs," Maxwell announced casually between bites, as if discussing the weather. The silence that followed was deafening. My fork clattered against fine china as it slipped from my trembling fingers. Across the table, my mother-in-law Victoria's face lit up with poorly concealed satisfaction, while my sister-in-law Sarah reached for my hand under the table. The previous week's fertility clinic results lay heavy in my mind. Our third failed IVF attempt. Maxwell knew this. He'd held me as I cried after each failure, promising we'd face it together, or so I thought. "Maxwell," I managed to whisper, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "We agreed to look into adoption. The Bennett legacy needs biological heirs, Catherine." He wouldn't even look at me, instead swirling the wine in his glass with studied concentration. "I've already spoken with my lawyers. You'll be well taken care of course." Of course. Because 15 years of building a life together, of supporting his dreams, of managing our charitable foundation, could be dismissed with a generous check. I felt the weight of every dinner party I'd hosted, every business contact I'd cultivated, every late night I'd spent reviewing contracts with him, all reduced to nothing in the face of my apparent biological failing. When? The question came from my father-in-law, Robert, his usual booming voice uncharacteristically quiet. "The papers will be ready Monday morning," Maxwell replied, finally meeting my gaze with those steel-gray eyes I'd once found so captivating. Now they held only cold determination. "I trust we can handle this privately and efficiently." I stood up slowly, my legs surprisingly steady. The emerald silk dress I'd chosen specially for this evening, Maxwell's favorite, suddenly felt like a costume in a cruel play. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying across the stunned silence. I seemed to have lost my appetite. As I walked toward the door, head held high despite the tears threatening to fall, I heard Victoria's voice. "It's for the best, dear. You must have known this was coming." I paused at the doorway, turning to face the family I'd devoted my life to. "No, Victoria, I didn't. You see, I actually believed in love, commitment, and the vows we took. My mistake, clearly." That night, as I packed my essentials in the guest room, I couldn't bear to enter our bedroom. I found myself staring at my reflection in the antique mirror Maxwell had bought me in Venice on our 10th anniversary. The woman looking back at me was both familiar and strange. Auburn hair styled perfectly, makeup still flawless, but her green eyes held a wildness I'd never seen before. I thought about the foundation's upcoming projects, the children's hospital wing we were about to break ground on, the literacy program I'd developed from scratch, all of it slipping through my fingers like sand. But somewhere beneath the grief and humiliation, a spark of anger began to burn. Sarah called twice, but I let it go to voicemail. I needed clarity, and I knew exactly where to find it. There was one person who'd warned me about Maxwell's obsession with legacy years ago. Someone I'd dismissed as jealous and bitter. James Smith, Maxwell's former business partner and current rival. As I drove through the rain-slicked streets of Boston that night, I didn't know I was driving toward not just answers, but a completely new chapter of my life. All I knew was that the perfectly crafted world I'd lived in for 15 years had crumbled, and standing in the ruins, I was finally free to build something new. My hand shook as I dialed the number I'd kept all these years, more out of business courtesy than any expectation of using it. 3 rings later, a familiar voice answered. "Catherine Bennett. I've been wondering when you'd call." James Smith's office wasn't what I expected. Instead of the sleek, modern decor typical of Boston's financial district, his corner suite felt more like a cozy library. Leather-bound books lined the walls, and a vintage record player softly played jazz in the background. It was nearly midnight, but he'd agreed to meet me without hesitation. "You look exactly the same," I said, accepting the cup of green tea he offered. My hands were still trembling slightly, and the warmth of the porcelain cup helped steady them. "You don't," he replied, settling into the armchair across from me. The Catherine I knew 5 years ago wouldn't have come here alone at midnight after being blindsided by her husband at a family dinner. I nearly dropped the cup. How did you? Victoria called her bridge club friends before dessert was served. His dark eyes held a mixture of sympathy and something else I couldn't quite read. News travels fast in certain circles. Of course it did. I could already imagine the whispers, the pitying looks, the not-so-subtle speculation about what I'd done wrong. In our social circle, a wife being replaced was never the husband's fault. "Tell me something, James," I said, setting down the untouched tea. "That day you warned me about Maxwell's legacy obsession. What did you really know?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying me with an intensity that made me want to look away. But I held his gaze. I'd spent 15 years looking away from uncomfortable truths. "No more. Maxwell's first wife," he finally said. "Did he ever tell you why they really divorced?" The room suddenly felt colder. He said they wanted different things. She wanted to focus on her career, and he wanted a family. James's bitter laugh made me flinch. Rebecca wanted children desperately. They tried for 3 years. When she couldn't conceive, he did exactly what he's doing to you. Same script, different actress. My mind raced back through the years, trying to spot the signs I must have missed. The way Maxwell would tense up when friends announced pregnancies. His obsessive interest in genetic heritage. The family tree dating back 6 generations hanging in his study. "There's more," James continued, pulling out a folder from his desk drawer. "Remember the Henderson merger last year?" Of course. Maxwell worked on it personally. It had been a major coup for the company, absorbing a smaller but innovative tech firm. "Did you know Tom Henderson's daughter just had twins through IVF? The same clinic you've been using, ironically. Maxwell's been having dinner with them twice a month." The implication hit me like a physical blow. You think he's already planned his next marriage?" "I think Maxwell Bennett has never done anything without a carefully constructed plan." James's voice was gentle now. "The question is, Catherine, what's yours?" I stood up abruptly, pacing the room. The city lights twinkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. A world I'd been part of, but never fully belonged to. "Why are you telling me this? Why help me at all?" James leaned back in his chair, a shadow crossing his face. "Because 15 years ago, I watched Maxwell destroy someone I cared about. Because I stayed silent then, thinking it wasn't my place to interfere. And because—" He hesitated, then continued more softly. "Because you deserve to write your own story, not be a character in his." The words hit home harder than I expected. How much of my life had been shaped by Maxwell's vision? Even my role at the foundation had been carefully curated, the perfect philanthropist wife, making him look good in society pages. "There's an opening on my board," James said casually, too casually. "Executive Director of Corporate Social Responsibility. The kind of position that would typically require someone with, say, 15 years of experience running a major charitable foundation." I stopped pacing. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a choice. Maxwell expects you to take his settlement and disappear quietly. Maybe move to the Cape, join a tennis club, eventually remarry someone suitable but less ambitious." His eyes met mine. "Is that what you want?" The answer came immediately, surprising me with its certainty. "No." "Good." He stood up, walking to a cabinet and pulling out a bottle of scotch. "Because I have a proposition for you, one that could help us both." As he poured 2 glasses, I noticed his hands weren't entirely steady either. Whatever he was about to propose, it wasn't just business. "The Henderson merger," he said, handing me a glass. "It's not as solid as it appears. There are irregularities, the kind that could cause problems for Maxwell if they came to light. Especially now, with the IPO coming up." My heart started racing. "How do you know about the IPO? It's not public yet." His smile was sharp enough to cut. "Because, Catherine, in business as in marriage, Maxwell has a pattern, and patterns can be predicted." I took a sip of scotch, letting it burn away the last of my hesitation. "Tell me more." As James began laying out his plan, I realized 2 things. First, that my years beside Maxwell hadn't just been about playing the perfect wife. I'd learned more about business than either of us had realized. And second, that the woman I'd been at dinner just hours ago was already gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who wasn't afraid to fight back. The city lights seemed brighter now, full of possibility rather than accusation. But as James continued speaking, a new worry began to form. I interrupted him mid-sentence. "James," I said quietly, "why do I feel like I'm making a deal with another devil?" His answer would change everything that came after. James's answer still echoed in my mind days later. "Maybe you are making a deal with a devil, but at least I'm honest about my horns." The following weeks passed in a blur of lawyers' meetings and painful transitions. I moved into a boutique hotel downtown, refusing Sarah's offers to stay with her. I needed space to think, to plan, to become someone new. Maxwell's lawyers were efficient, just as he'd promised. The settlement offer was generous, enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life, if I chose to. I didn't sign. Instead, I did something that shocked everyone, including myself. I asked for the foundation instead of money. "Be reasonable, Catherine," Maxwell said during one of our mediation sessions. He looked tired, the first cracks showing in his perfect facade. "The foundation is tied to the Bennett name. It's part of our family legacy." "Interesting choice of words," I replied, my voice steady. "Legacy. Tell me, Maxwell, how's dinner with the Hendersons? I heard their daughter makes excellent roasted duck." The color drained from his face. For the first time in our marriage, I saw real fear in his eyes. "Good. What exactly are you implying?" "Nothing yet." I smiled, channeling 15 years of watching him negotiate. "But I think we both know there's more than one kind of legacy at stake here." I walked out of that meeting with control of the foundation, though I had to keep the Bennett name attached to it. A small price to pay for what I had planned. The job offer from James came through officially the next day. Executive Director of Corporate Social Responsibility at Smith Industries, with a salary that made my eyes widen. The press release was carefully worded. "Catherine Bennett brings her extensive philanthropic experience to Smith Industries, strengthening the company's commitment to social causes." The business world buzzed with speculation. It was a bold move, joining my husband's biggest rival right after our separation was announced. Many questioned my judgment. Some called it a betrayal. None of that mattered. I was finally writing my own story. What they didn't know was what happened in James's office that first night, after his cryptic answer about being a devil. He'd laid out everything. The irregularities in the Henderson merger, Maxwell's pattern of corporate maneuvering, and most importantly, the truth about why James and Maxwell's partnership had really ended years ago. "He didn't just push me out," James had explained, pouring another scotch. "He used my research, my innovations, claimed them as his own. The patents that built his empire, half of them should have been mine. Why didn't you fight back?" I'd asked. "I tried, but Maxwell is very good at covering his tracks. And at the time, I couldn't prove anything." His smile had turned predatory. "But now, with you on the inside of the foundation, with your knowledge of his operations, well, things could be different." I'd studied him carefully. "You're using me for revenge." "Yes," he'd admitted readily. "And you're using me for the same thing. The question is, Catherine, can two people using each other still help each other?" I took the job. The first month was harder than I expected. Learning a new corporate culture, proving myself to skeptical executives, all while managing the foundation's transition. But I discovered something surprising. I was good at it, really good. Years of playing the perfect corporate wife had taught me more than just social graces. I understood the intricate dance of power and influence that drove the business world. James proved to be a complicated ally, brilliant but demanding, supportive, yet somehow always holding something back. We worked late into the night often, poring over documents, building our case against Maxwell piece by piece. Sometimes I caught him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between admiration and concern. "You're different," he said one evening, as we shared takeout in his office. "From when we first met years ago." "I had to be," I replied, picking at my pad tie. "That Catherine couldn't have survived this." "No," he agreed softly, "but I wonder sometimes if you realize what this path might cost you." I was about to ask what he meant when my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Need to talk. It's about Maxwell and the Hendersons, and something else you should know." My heart skipped. Sarah had always been different from the rest of the Bennetts. Warmer, more genuine. She'd stayed in touch despite her family's disapproval, feeding me occasional bits of information about Maxwell's movements. But something in her message felt urgent, dangerous. "I have to go," I told James, gathering my things quickly. He caught my arm as I passed. "Catherine." His touch was gentle but insistent. "Remember what I said about patterns? Maxwell isn't the only one who has them. Be careful who you trust." I pulled away, unsettled by the warmth of his hand, by the warning in his voice, by the growing suspicion that I was caught in a game much bigger than I'd realized. Sarah was waiting at our old favorite cafe, her face pale with worry. As I sat down, she pushed a manila envelope across the table. "You need to see this," she whispered. "But first, you need to know. I think James Smith isn't who you think he is, and I can prove it." The envelope felt heavy in my hands, weighted with secrets that would force me to choose between revenge and redemption, between trusting my heart and protecting myself. I opened it slowly, unaware that this moment would change everything I thought I knew about both Maxwell and James, and about myself. My hands trembled as I spread the contents of Sarah's envelope across the cafe table. Medical records, emails, and photographs spilled out, pieces of a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. "Before you look at these," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you should know that finding this information put me in a difficult position. Maxwell is my brother, but you're the sister I never had." The first document was a medical report from the fertility clinic. Not mine. Rebecca's, Maxwell's first wife. I scanned it, my heart pounding harder with each line. According to the report, there had been nothing wrong with Rebecca's fertility. The problem had been Maxwell's. "This can't be right," I muttered. But even as I spoke, pieces started falling into place. Maxwell's insistence on using specific doctors, his refusal to get tested himself, always putting the blame on me. "Keep reading," Sarah urged gently. The next document was an email chain between Maxwell and Tom Henderson, dated 6 months before our last fertility treatment. My blood ran cold as I read their exchange about ensuring success and managing medical results. They had deliberately sabotaged my treatments. "Why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why go through all this instead of just telling me the truth?" "Image," Sarah replied. "In Maxwell's world, everything is about perception. He couldn't be seen as the one with the problem. But there's more. Look at the next file." It was a private investigator's report on James Smith. As I read, the coffee in my stomach turned to acid. James hadn't just been Maxwell's business partner. He'd been Rebecca's brother, the same Rebecca who had died in a car accident 2 years after her divorce from Maxwell, an accident that had never been fully investigated. "James never told you about Rebecca, did he?" Sarah asked softly. "About how she was about to go public with evidence of Maxwell's corporate fraud right before she died? Or about how James blamed Maxwell but could never prove anything?" The cafe suddenly felt too small, too crowded. My carefully constructed plans were crumbling around me. I'd thought I was cleverly playing both sides, using James's resources to expose Maxwell while building my own independence. Instead, I'd walked right into the middle of a decade-old vendetta. "There's one more thing," Sarah said, pulling out her phone. She pulled up a recent photo of James at a charity gala. In the background, partially obscured but unmistakable, was Tom Henderson's daughter, the same woman Maxwell had been meeting with. They were holding hands. "It's all connected," I whispered, the truth finally dawning on me. James and the Hendersons. They're working together. They're using me just like Maxwell did. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "What are you going to do?" I stared at the documents spread before me, each one representing a different betrayal. The foundation I'd fought for now felt like a poisoned chalice. The job at Smith Industries, an elaborate trap. Even my revenge had never truly been my own. "I need to think," I said, gathering the papers with shaking hands. "And I need you to tell me everything you know about Rebecca's accident." As Sarah began to speak, my phone buzzed with a message from James. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. Need you there early to discuss the Maxwell situation. 7 a.m. Another message followed immediately. "And Catherine? I think it's time we talked about Rebecca." I looked up at Sarah, whose face reflected my own fear. "He knows we know. Be careful," she warned. Remember what happened to Rebecca when she tried to expose them. I stood up, my mind already racing with possibilities. I need a favor, a big one. Anything. I need you to get me access to Maxwell's private office, tonight. Sarah's eyes widened. He never leaves those files unprotected. The security, I know. But if we're going to understand what really happened to Rebecca, if I'm going to survive this, I took a deep breath. I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with. Both Maxwell and James are playing a game that started long before I came into the picture. It's time I changed the rules. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. I can get you in after midnight. But Catherine, she gripped my arm. What if what you find is worse than what you already know? I thought about the past 3 months, the humiliation of that dinner, the thrill of fighting back, the complicated dance with James, all of it built on lies and half-truths. Then at least I'll know who my real enemies are. As I walked out of the cafe into the gathering dusk, I realized I had less than 12 hours to uncover the truth about Rebecca's death, understand James's real agenda, and figure out how to stay alive while being caught between 2 powerful men who had already proven they would do anything to protect their secrets. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd wanted to rewrite my story, but instead, I'd stumbled into a tragedy that had been unfolding for years. The question was, could I change the ending before history repeated itself? My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Maxwell. We need to talk. About James, about Rebecca, about everything. Please. For the first time in our marriage, he'd said please. That's how I knew I was in real danger. The Bennett building looked different at midnight. The gleaming glass tower that had been my second home for 15 years now loomed before me like a warning. Sarah had texted the security codes, but my hands still shook as I typed them in. You have 20 minutes, she'd said. The security cameras will loop old footage for that long. After that, she hadn't needed to finish the sentence. The executive floor was eerily silent. I'd walked these halls thousands of times, but never like this. Never as an intruder. My heels clicked softly on the marble floor as I approached Maxwell's office, each step echoing with memories of happier times. The door opened with a soft click. Sarah had been right about the override code. Maxwell's office was exactly as I remembered. Immaculate, imposing, with that massive desk dominating the space. The same desk where we'd celebrated countless deals, where I'd brought him dinner during late nights, where he'd first told me he loved me. Focus, Catherine. I went straight to the hidden safe behind his grandfather's portrait. Another piece of information from Sarah. The combination was our wedding date. Typical Maxwell, sentimental about all the wrong things. Inside, I found what I was looking for. A red leather folder marked RC Incident. Rebecca Smith. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first page was a police report about her accident. Heavy rain, brake failure, a tragic curve on a coastal road. But the next document made my blood freeze. An invoice from a mechanic dated 2 days before the accident for specialized modifications to brake lines. Oh God, I whispered. Not quite what you were expecting, is it? I spun around. James stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable in the dim light. How did you... Sarah told me you'd be here. He held up his phone. She's been working with me from the beginning, Catherine. Did you really think a Bennett would betray family for friendship? My mind raced. The documents in my hands suddenly felt like they were burning. You knew about Maxwell tampering with Rebecca's car. Of course I knew. He stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. Just like I knew he'd do the same to you eventually. Maxwell doesn't leave loose ends. The fertility treatments, I said slowly. You knew about those too? I needed you angry, Catherine. Angry enough to help me take him down. His voice softened. But I didn't expect to care what happened to you. How touching, a new voice said. Maxwell stood in the connecting door from his private conference room, looking more tired than I'd ever seen him. My wife and my ex-brother-in-law meeting in secret. Again. James didn't seem surprised to see him. Of course not. This had all been orchestrated. I was standing in the middle of a trap that had been years in the making. She's not your wife anymore, James said quietly. And Rebecca was more than just your wife too, before you destroyed her. I didn't kill Rebecca, Maxwell snapped. That accident, save it. James cut him off. Catherine has the proof in her hands. No, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. She has what you wanted her to find. I held up the folder. These documents, they're too perfect, too convenient. You planted them. Both men stared at me. Very good, Maxwell said softly. James always underestimated you, just like he underestimated Rebecca. What's that supposed to mean? James demanded. I looked between them, two powerful men who'd spent years locked in a battle over lies and half-truths. Rebecca didn't die in that accident, did she? Maxwell's laugh was hollow. Finally, someone asks the right question. What are you talking about? James's composure cracked for the first time. I identified her body myself. Did you? Maxwell walked to his desk, pressed a button I'd never noticed before. A hidden panel in the wall slid open. Why don't you ask her yourself? A woman stepped out of the hidden room. She was older than in the photos I'd seen, with streaks of gray in her dark hair, but unmistakably alive. Rebecca Smith looked at her brother with tears in her eyes. Hello, James. It's been a long time. I watched the color drain from James's face as his carefully constructed revenge plot collapsed. But something still didn't add up. Why? I asked Rebecca. Why fake your death? Why let your own brother believe? Because I had to protect him, she said simply. From himself. From what he might do if he knew the truth about the merger, about what really happened between Maxwell and me. Which was what? James's voice was barely a whisper. Rebecca looked at Maxwell, who nodded slightly. Tell him. Tell them both. It's time. What Rebecca said next would change everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the true price of revenge. And it would force me to make a choice that would affect all our lives forever. The red folder slipped from my fingers, scattering papers across the floor like fallen leaves. In the distance, a clock struck 1. My 20 minutes were up. But time, I was beginning to realize, had never been the real enemy. Rebecca's voice was soft but steady as she began to speak. The night seemed to hold its breath, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows like distant stars watching our drama unfold. The merger that destroyed your partnership, she said, looking between Maxwell and James, was never about business. It was about protecting both of you. Protecting us from what? James demanded, still visibly shaken by his sister's resurrection. From our father. Rebecca's words fell like stones into still water. He was embezzling from the company, James, using your research patents as collateral for illegal loans. When I discovered it, he threatened to destroy everything. Your work, your reputation, all of it. I watched James's face contort with disbelief. That's impossible. Father would never... The proof is in the Cayman Islands account, Maxwell interjected quietly. Account number 247891. The same one you've been trying to trace for years, James. It wasn't my secret account. It was your father's. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at Maxwell, really looked at him, and saw something I'd missed before. The weight of a secret kept for years. The hostile takeover, Rebecca continued, was the only way to protect the patents, to keep them from being seized when everything fell apart. Maxwell helped me orchestrate it. But why not tell me? James's voice cracked. I was your brother, Becca. We could have faced it together. Because you worshipped him, she said gently, and because I knew you'd try to save him. The evidence would have gone public. You would have lost everything you'd worked for. So you chose him. James gestured at Maxwell, bitterness dripping from every word. You chose my rival over your own brother. No, Maxwell said. She chose you. The plan was always to return the patents once the statute of limitations expired. But then you started digging, getting too close to the truth. Rebecca's accident was staged to protect you from yourself. I found my voice at last. But the fertility treatments? The dinner? Why hurt me to maintain a lie that was about to expire anyway? Maxwell's face softened with genuine regret. Because I fell in love with you, Catherine. The plan was never to marry again, but then I met you and... He paused, struggling with words for the first time I could remember. I couldn't tell you the truth without risking everything. And when James hired you, I thought... You thought I was part of his revenge plot, I finished. That's why you staged that cruel dinner. To push me away before I could discover everything. I didn't know about the fertility treatments, Rebecca said quietly. That was unforgivable, Maxwell. Yes, he agreed. It was. James laughed suddenly, a hollow sound. So, I've spent 10 years plotting revenge against the wrong person. Meanwhile, our father, he sank into a chair, looking lost. He died last year, Rebecca said softly, in Buenos Aires. That's why I decided it was finally time to end this charade. I stood there, processing it all. The grand revenge plot that had consumed James was based on a lie meant to protect him. Maxwell's cruelty to me had been an attempt to protect a secret that wasn't even his to keep. And Rebecca. Rebecca had sacrificed everything to protect the two men she loved most, only to watch them destroy each other anyway. What happens now? I asked, looking at each of them in turn. Now, Rebecca said, pulling out a USB drive. We tell the truth. All of it. I've spent 10 years documenting everything. The world should know that neither Maxwell nor James was the villain in this story. The company's shares will plummet, Maxwell warned. Then they plummet, I said firmly. Some things are more important than stock prices. James stood up slowly. The patents will be returned to you, Maxwell finished. As intended. A notification popped up on my phone, an email from Sarah. My hands shook as I read it. Board meeting canceled. Leaked documents about Henderson merger being investigated by SEC. That was my insurance policy, Rebecca explained. If anything happened to me tonight, really happened, everything would go public automatically. I looked at this woman who had orchestrated such an elaborate deception out of love, and I understood something profound about sacrifice and redemption. The foundation, I said suddenly. That's why you let me have it so easily, Maxwell. You knew this was coming. He nodded. It needs someone untainted by all this. Someone strong enough to maintain its mission even when the truth comes out. And Smith Industries? I asked James. His smile was tired but genuine. Needs an executive director of corporate social responsibility who understands that redemption is possible, if you're still interested. I felt the weight of their gazes, Maxwell, James, Rebecca, each of them waiting to see what I would choose. The night stretched out before us, full of possibilities and second chances. But before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message that would force us all to confront one final, shocking truth. One that would make everything we'd learned tonight pale in comparison. The message was from Tom Henderson's daughter, and attached was a photograph that would change all our lives forever. My hands trembled as I opened the photo attachment. The others gathered around, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of my phone screen. The image loaded slowly, like fate itself was building suspense. It was a hospital document dated 15 years ago, with two names that made my heart stop. Maxwell Bennett and Claire Henderson, Tom Henderson's wife. That's impossible, Maxwell whispered, but his face had gone ash white. The document was a fertility clinic consent form, signed by both parties. But it wasn't for treatment. It was for storage of genetic material, specifically embryos. There's more, I said, scrolling through the attached messages from Emma Henderson, Tom's daughter. The embryos, they were used 3 months ago. Emma is pregnant with twins. The silence in the room was absolute. Rebecca was the first to understand. The Henderson merger, she breathed. It wasn't just about business. Claire must have told Tom about the embryos. And Tom used them to blackmail Maxwell, James finished. That's why you pushed through the merger despite the irregularities. Why you were having dinner with them. I looked at Maxwell, really looked at him. The man who had discarded me for not being able to give him heirs was about to become a father, to children conceived before he ever met me. Did you know? I asked him quietly. When you married me, did you know these embryos existed? No, he said hoarsely. Claire and I, it was before I met Rebecca. We were young, planning for a future that never happened. I thought the embryos had been destroyed when she married Tom. Another message popped up from Emma. I thought you deserved to know. Mom finally told Dad the truth last week. The twins are yours, Maxwell, and I won't let my father use them as bargaining chips in his corporate games. I watched the mighty Maxwell Bennett crumple into his chair, the weight of consequences long buried finally catching up to him. 15 years, Rebecca said softly. We've all been dancing around secrets that go back 15 years. And now, Now everything changes, I finished. James moved to the window, staring out at the city lights. The SEC investigation will uncover the Henderson blackmail. The merger will fall apart. Let it, I said, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. Let all of it come out. The truth about your father, Rebecca's sacrifice, the embryos, all of it. Catherine, Maxwell started, but I held up my hand. No, listen to me. All of you. We've been trapped in this web of secrets for too long. Rebecca gave up 10 years of her life to protect her brother. James wasted a decade plotting revenge based on lies. Maxwell, you threw away our marriage trying to protect a secret that wasn't even yours to keep. And I took a deep breath. I almost lost myself trying to play both sides of a game I didn't even understand. Emma's next message made my phone buzz. I'm sending these documents to the SEC in the morning. I'm sorry, but I can't let my father use my children, your children, as pawns in his game. Maxwell reached for the phone, but I pulled it away. No more controlling the narrative, no more manipulating people's lives. These children deserve better than to be born into a web of corporate intrigue and family secrets. What are you suggesting? James asked quietly. I looked at each of them in turn. Rebecca, who had sacrificed everything to protect those she loved. James, whose quest for revenge had nearly consumed him. And Maxwell, my soon-to-be ex-husband, about to face the consequences of choices made long before he met me. I'm suggesting we do something none of you have done in 15 years, I said. Tell the truth, all of it, on our own terms. The companies, Maxwell began. Will survive, I cut him off. Or they won't. But those twins deserve to be born into honesty, not another generation of secrets. Rebecca stepped forward, placing a hand on her brother's shoulder. Catherine's right. Enough shadows. James nodded slowly. The patents were never worth this price. Maxwell stood, straightening his tie, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. And you? He asked me. What will you do? I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. I'm going to run the foundation. Really run it, not just as a society wife's project. And I'm going to make sure those twins grow up knowing they have a whole extended family who chose truth over pride. Even after everything I did to you? Maxwell's voice was barely a whisper. Especially after everything. Because that's how we break the cycle. My phone buzzed one final time. Emma again. I'm at the hospital. Early contractions. Please, I don't want to do this alone. I looked at Maxwell, saw the fear and hope warring in his eyes. In that moment, I made a choice that would define not just my future, but the future of 2 unborn children. Come on, I said, gathering my things. Let's go meet your children. It's time to start writing a new story. As we left the office, Maxwell, James, Rebecca, and I, the sun was just beginning to rise over Boston Harbor. A new day, bringing with it the promise of truth, redemption, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to heal old wounds. But first, there were 2 new lives coming into the world, and I had made a promise to myself and to them. No more secrets, no more lies, no more letting the past poison the future. The story wasn't over yet, but at least now we were all finally reading from the same page. The hospital corridor felt endless as we rushed toward the maternity ward. Maxwell's usual confident stride had been replaced by something almost tentative. Behind us, Rebecca and James followed, their footsteps echoing our urgency. Emma Henderson was already in delivery when we arrived. Her mother, Claire, stood outside the room, her perfectly maintained facade cracking at the sight of Maxwell. You came, she whispered, then noticed me. Catherine? I don't understand. Neither do I most days, I replied with a gentle smile. But right now, that's not what matters. A nurse emerged from the delivery room. Ms. Henderson is asking for Mr. Bennett. She paused, looking between Maxwell and James. The father? Maxwell stepped forward, then hesitated, looking back at me. I nodded encouragingly. Some moments transcend past hurts, past betrayals. This was one of them. Go, I said softly. Your children need you. As he disappeared into the delivery room, Claire sank into a chair, her shoulders shaking. I never meant for any of this to happen, she said. The embryos, I'd almost forgotten about them until Emma couldn't conceive. When she found out about their existence, You should have told me. Maxwell's voice came from behind us. He was wearing surgical scrubs now, his face pale but determined. Would it have changed anything? Claire asked. Before he could answer, a cry came from the delivery room, the first breath of a new life entering the world. Maxwell rushed back in, leaving us in the hallway with our tangled histories and complicated emotions. The next 2 hours were a blur of activity. Tom Henderson arrived, his face stormy until he saw his daughter holding her newborn sons. I watched through the window as Maxwell held one of the twins, his whole body trembling with emotion. He always wanted to be a father, Rebecca said quietly beside me. It was the one dream he never managed to control or negotiate. I thought about all our failed attempts at IVF, about the cruelty of fate that had his children growing in another woman's womb, even as we tried desperately to conceive. But looking at his face now, transformed by joy and terror in equal measure, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Ms. Bennett? A nurse approached with forms. Ms. Henderson asked that you be listed as the twins' godmother. If you're willing. I stared at the papers, then at Emma's tired but serene face through the window. She smiled and nodded. You're the strongest person I know, she'd told me during one of our secret meetings over the past months. These babies will need that strength in their lives. As I signed the forms, I felt the weight of the future settling on my shoulders, not as a burden, but as a privilege. These children would have a complicated family tree, but they would also have something precious, people committed to breaking old patterns. James cleared his throat. The SEC will still want answers tomorrow. Then we'll give them answers, I replied. The truth about everything, your father's embezzlement, Rebecca's sacrifice, the Henderson merger. But not today. Today is for new beginnings. Rebecca squeezed her brother's hand. Maybe it's time we had that long overdue conversation with our lawyers about the patents. Maybe it is, he agreed softly. The door opened, and Maxwell emerged holding one of the twins. Without a word, he walked to me. Would you like to meet your godson? He asked. As I took the tiny bundle, looking down at eyes that somehow held all our futures, I understood something profound about forgiveness. It wasn't about forgetting the past or excusing wrongs. It was about choosing to build something new from the ashes of what was lost. What's his name? I asked. Emma's voice came from the doorway where she held the other twin. Alexander and Nicholas, she said, after their grandfathers. If that's okay? I saw James flinch at his father's name, saw Rebecca's hand tighten on his shoulder, but then James straightened up. It's perfect, he said. A reminder that our past shapes us but doesn't have to define us. Little Alexander squirmed in my arms, his tiny hand wrapping around my finger with surprising strength. In that grip, I felt all the possibilities of tomorrow. The sun was setting now, painting the hospital room in shades of gold. Claire and Tom sat together, their own complicated history softened by the miracle of their grandchildren. Rebecca and James stood close, decades of misunderstandings beginning to heal. And Maxwell was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not love, not regret, but something like recognition, as if he was finally seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time. But it was Emma's voice that captured the moment perfectly. Look, she said softly, they're holding hands. And indeed, between their bassinets, Alexander and Nicholas had reached for each other, tiny fingers intertwined, a symbol of connection that transcended all our adult complications. I touched the foundation's business card in my pocket, thinking of all the work ahead. The truth would cost us all something, but looking at those twins, I knew it would be worth it. Tomorrow would bring challenges, press conferences, SEC investigations, family reckonings. But tonight was for simpler truths. The grip of a baby's hand, the healing power of honesty, and the endless possibility of new beginnings. As if reading my thoughts, Maxwell spoke softly. I think these little ones are going to rewrite all our stories. No, I corrected gently. They're going to write their own. Our job is just to make sure they have blank pages, not pages weighed down by our mistakes. Outside the window, the city lights began to twinkle, each one a star in our own private universe of second chances. 3 years later, I stood in the same dining room where my marriage had ended, but everything was different now. The crystal chandelier still cast its warm glow, but instead of tension and betrayal, the air was filled with children's laughter and the warm buzz of conversation. Alexander and Nicholas, now energetic toddlers, chased each other around the table where our blended family gathered for their birthday celebration. Emma beamed from her seat. Her husband, David, a kind-hearted pediatrician she'd met during her pregnancy, helping their 1-year-old daughter with her cake. "Aunt Catherine," Alexander called out, running to me with his arms outstretched. "Tell Nick he has to share the new train set." I scooped him up, breathing in that peculiar sweet scent that only toddlers seem to have. "Why don't we both go talk to him about it?" Maxwell watched us from across the room, a small smile playing on his lips. Our divorce had been finalized 2.5 years ago, but we'd found something unexpected in its wake, a genuine friendship built on honesty and shared purpose. The foundation had thrived under my leadership, focusing on supporting families affected by domestic violence and funding fertility treatments for couples who couldn't afford them. Maxwell had surprised everyone by becoming one of our biggest donors, matching every grant we gave. James and Rebecca sat together near the window, their relationship slowly healing through years of therapy and open conversations. Smith Industries and Bennett Corp had merged 6 months ago, not through hostile takeovers or secret deals, but through transparent negotiations and a shared vision for ethical business practices. The SEC investigation had been difficult, but facing it together, all of us telling the complete truth, had been oddly liberating. The company's stocks had taken a hit, but our transparency had ultimately earned back investor trust. More importantly, it had earned back our self-respect. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Claire appeared beside me, helping Nicholas arrange his trains into a perfect line. "Just thinking about that dinner 3 years ago," I replied. "How everything felt like it was ending, but it was really just beginning." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Her marriage to Tom hadn't survived the truth coming out, but she'd found her own path, starting a support group for women navigating complex family dynamics. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Not signing the settlement, taking on the foundation, becoming part of this complicated family?" I watched as Nicholas shared his favorite train with his brother, their identical smiles lighting up the room. "Never. Some things are worth more than money or pride." "Speaking of worth," Emma joined us, her eyes twinkling. "Have you told them your news yet?" All eyes turned to me. I took a deep breath, my hand instinctively going to my stomach. I was waiting for the right moment. "Catherine?" Maxwell's voice held a question. "I'm pregnant," I announced, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. 12 weeks along. And before anyone asks, it's through IVF. And yes, I'm doing this on my own. Though, I smiled at the twins. I have a feeling this baby will have more family than it knows what to do with. The room erupted in joy. Rebecca was the first to hug me, whispering, "You're going to be an amazing mother." James raised his glass in a toast. Emma wiped happy tears from her eyes. Maxwell approached last, his expression soft. "Congratulations, Catherine. You deserve all the happiness in the world." "We all do," I replied, "even if it doesn't come in the packages we expected." Later that evening, as the party wound down, I found myself in the garden. The twins were asleep upstairs in their rooms. Yes, they had rooms here, just as they had rooms at Emma's, at my place, and at every other member of their extended family's homes. They were the most loved children I knew. Sarah joined me, linking her arm through mine. "Remember when you called me that night, ready to tear apart Maxwell's office looking for answers?" I laughed. "Remember when you were secretly working with James?" "We all had our parts to play," she said thoughtfully. "But you were the one who taught us how to stop playing parts and start being real." The garden lights twinkled like stars, and somewhere in the distance, a car honked. Life in all its messy, beautiful reality continued on. My phone buzzed, a message from my date tonight, expecting me later. He was a kind man, a widowed professor I'd met through the foundation, who understood that love could be both simple and complex. "You know what I learned?" I said to Sarah, watching a shooting star trace its path across the sky. "Sometimes the universe gives you exactly what you need, even when it's nothing like what you thought you wanted." "And what did you need?" I thought about the twins upstairs, about my growing baby, about the foundation's work, about all the broken pieces that had somehow created a more beautiful mosaic. "The courage to write my own story," I answered, "and the wisdom to know that sometimes the best stories are the ones we write together." Inside, I could hear Alexander stirring, probably looking for his favorite bedtime story. As Sarah and I headed back in, I touched the small bump that would become my daughter. Yes, I just found out today, and smiled. Some people might find our family strange. The ex-wife turned godmother, the biological mother and her new husband, the uncle who was once an enemy, the aunt back from the dead, and all the complex relationships we'd woven together. But love, I'd learned, doesn't follow conventional patterns. It creates its own. As I climbed the stairs to read to the twins, I caught my reflection in the same mirror that had witnessed my tears 3 years ago. The woman looking back at me now was stronger, wiser, and infinitely more content. She had learned that true happiness doesn't come from fitting into someone else's story. It comes from having the courage to write your own. And what a story it had turned out to be.